All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Hope everybody's having a great summer so far and staying cool. I know we're in the midst of quite the heat wave here in the Washington, D.C. area, but that's July, so I suppose we shouldn't be too surprised. Yeah, so today we're happy to have one of our good friends in the industry, Shon Isenhour from Eruditio, here to talk about project planning, which is, one of those softer skills, but boy, are those sometimes the toughest, right? So he's going to share some really great information with us for those of you who have big projects coming up or even smaller projects, just walking us through all the things you guys need to be considering and making sure you're paying attention to so you can have a nice smooth project with everybody being all on board and with the outcomes you're hoping to experience. So should be a really good topic for everybody. And as always, I am going to record this, so if you have to hop off early or if you've got some colleagues that you wish could listen in to Shon's message, we'll have this up on our website later this afternoon, so you could definitely take a listen again, or like I said, share that out with folks who need to hear this. We also have the opportunity for you all to ask questions. So just you can type those into the little questions box. I'll be keeping an eye on those, and I'll get those tossed over to Shon throughout the session if it makes sense, or of course at the end we'll do some Q&A. So keep that in mind as well. And I always like to mention, since we are doing this live, just bear with us if we have any technical glitches with audio or and the internet goes out or anything like that, we'll jump on it real quick and get it taken care of. And I know Shon has some videos he's going to show as well, so just bear with us if sometimes there can be a little delay on those. But with that, I will let Shon take over here. I'm going to switch the screen over to Shon. And Shon, thanks for being here, and we'll let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Maureen. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to spending a little bit of time today talking about project and project management. I'm going to go ahead and get my slides up and going here. All right. So today we're going to talk about 5 things that can save your next project. And really the basis for this was that over the years we've kind of watched a lot of projects be implemented. And those projects could be anything from the implementation of a new CMMS, Computerized Maintenance Management System, or EAM, Enterprise Asset Management System. It could be that someone's implementing planning and scheduling, or implementing reliability-centered maintenance or root cause analysis. It really doesn't matter what the project is, as long as we're talking about projects that really affect the organization as a whole. And that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time today. So I looked back over a lot of those implementations, and I wanted to look at 5 core philosophies or 5 core things that we could go through and address that would really increase our likelihood of being successful. And that's really the path I'm going to take you guys and gals down today as we go through the material. So I've got the outline here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it. It's just what I shared with you, but I like to have it in my presentation just to remind me of what this one is. Quick introductions. As Maureen said, my name is Shon Isenhour. I work for Eruditio. Eruditio is an education company located in Charleston, South Carolina. You can actually see our office there in orange. The aircraft carrier that's in that picture is actually where we do a lot of our training, and it's where our corporate headquarters is as well. Big things that we try to do there is really engage the students, make sure that they're applying the content, and making sure that they're retaining it and they're able to use it again in the future. So we could be doing anything from planning and scheduling training to reliability engineering training to our blended learning offerings. Any of those things are really all about application. Outside of work, you see a few other things on the page. That's my daughter. She's my little mini-me. She loves to do a lot of the same things that I do. And she occasionally drags me in some of the things that she likes to do, like the Star Wars picture down there at the corner. So just a quick look at me. I also have my blog up there in the top corner. The blog is reliabilitynow.com. We have about 200 and some odd short blog post available there. If someone is looking to have a kind of a toolbox topic type meeting or comment in a meeting, you can go and pull those small little bite-sized pieces of reliability right off of that blog. So again, that's reliabilitynow.com. So what I want to do is just kind of start by painting a picture. And that picture that I'm going to paint is what a lot of you probably look like when you come up with these great new projects, these great new ideas that you want to implement. Sometimes it happens right after you go to a conference or you go to training somewhere and someone really gets you fired up about this new topic or this new thing that you want to do. I've got a video here that I'm going to show you. Now, I'm going to warn you, the video is grainy. It's a cell phone video. It bounces around, and the audio is absolutely horrible. So there's no way the internet can mess this up. With that said, I'm going to take you through it, and then we're going to talk about the video when we finish. But what I want you to note as you go through is I want you to watch the leader in this video, and then I want you to notice some of these first followers that come along and what's happening in the video as a whole. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and then I'll be back with you guys as soon as it finishes.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore. It's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. See, it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out, you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute, you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
All right, so you can kind of see from that video, we are that lone nut. There's no doubt about it. If you come back to your facility and you start talking about this crazy concept called reliability, and we're going to do RCA, and we're going to do RCM, and all these crazy words and language and acronyms, you're going to be the shirtless dancing guy from the very beginning. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is how do you get those first followers? And I'm going to show you a few of those as we progress through the 5 key points. All right, so let's take a second to look at what bad looks like, though. You know, I over the years, as I think back to the implementations that have gone really wrong, the projects that haven't delivered the return on investment that everyone expected, you know, what does it look like? How does it start? How do I recognize it? So I wanted to point out a few of these, and hopefully you haven't seen these in your facility, but if you have, you'll know that this is what I would say bad project management and bad project planning looks like. First thing, there are wrong expectations. Somebody comes into the organization and says, you know what we want around here? We want 99% reliability. Now, in real life, that may be their expectation, but I can absolutely assure you, with the exception of a few industries like nuclear power and aviation, none of us can afford 99 or more % reliability. All right. So if someone comes in with that wrong expectation and it's never corrected, it's going to be absolutely impossible to deliver a product or a project that actually meets their needs. Now, the other is a lack of support. Maybe you come back and you're ready to do this, but the rest of the organization just looks at you and says, look at that lone nut. Why is he doing this? We don't want to fill out all that paperwork for root cause analysis. We're not going to sit in a room and do all those RCMs. All right. So you've got that lack of support from the very beginning, and that's something that we're going to definitely focus on today. Rambling starts is another troublesome one that I see fairly regular. And this is where, you know, we're not in a real big hurry. We're just going to kind of get this thing started, and maybe we'll go down this way for a little while. And if that doesn't work, we'll go over here. You know, maybe we'll put some predictive maintenance in play, and oh, our CMMS, we need to implement that. Let's work on that. So it's a very meandering, rambling start. And unfortunately, a lot of these cause so much energy bleed from the organization that the project as a whole never makes it to the intended expectations. Frustrations. You know, from the very beginning, if you haven't given the first three, you're going to drive a lot of frustration into the organization. If it's not clear what we're doing, if it's not clear why we're doing it, how it's going to affect me, if you're not delivering the right messaging enough, then frustration is going to just be born out of that and grow across the organization. And we're going to talk about some tools to kind of reduce that frustration and some of the reasons why it happens. The next one is the wrong path. And you know, how many times have you seen projects in your organization where someone started down a path and then realized maybe this isn't the right answer, maybe this isn't the way we should go? Maybe they were led by a perceived notion from the past or their past experience, and they really didn't take the time to understand what was really causing the underlying problem that they're trying to eliminate. Now, I'm going to show you here in just a few minutes. I'm going to show you some steps you can take to prevent that wrong path. The next one I see here is wrong order. Now, wrong order happens a lot, especially in the reliability world. You know, over and over and over, I see someone putting the pieces together and starting to build a reliability improvement strategy, but it's just not in the right cohesive order. And I'll give you an example of that. If we take, UE's got great tools, they've got great support. If we take all that great tools and that great support and we put it into your facility in the form of a new ultrasonic piece of equipment, or maybe you're using vibration from somebody else or infrared, you know, but you're bringing those predictive tools into your facility. If you bring those in, but you don't have a work order system, you don't have planning and scheduling, you don't have clear role expectations, all right? You've got great tools that can give you great results, but you don't have the rest of the process to make them work. Now you're just identifying failures, and then you're running them through your run to failure strategy, your existing way of reacting to failures. What we want to do is we want to first get planning and scheduling and work control and all those pieces in place, because we know by planning that work, we reduce the cost by 5 to 7 times, and then let the PM and the PDM tools, the predictive maintenance tools, let them identify the failures early enough that your planning and scheduling window actually works. So my point here is there are things that you want to do in a certain order. And if you get that order out of play, it can cause very good tools to give you very mediocre results. The next one you see here is having the wrong people on your focus teams that are working in the areas of your project. If you don't have a clear expectation for where you're going and what problems you might face along the way, there's a pretty good chance you probably don't have the right people on the teams. All right, and that I have seen over the years cause some real issues moving forward. The last, what does bad look like comment for today is scope creep. You know, you see this over and over. You set forth a project, but then everybody else starts adding in additional things to it. And before you know it, your project that was very, very directed and specific becomes very broad and meandering. And that, of course, can lead to you taking longer than you expected, but also just not getting the results that you expected. So to sum it up in a picture, I think everybody starts a project like this. You know, we're all in it, full power, ready to go, ready to take off. And unfortunately, a lot of our projects end up like this. All right. And so what I'm going to spend the rest of the afternoon or the rest of the time that I have with you guys today is kind of showing you some tools that you can use in each of the areas. So my top 5 for today, the big 5. Now this isn't based on project management or the PMP that's available as a certification in the project management world. These are the big 5 specifically the way I see them from an implementation standpoint. And there's a couple things in here that I'll dive a little deeper into, but I'm going to take you through all 5 right quick. So the first one, you need to know where you are, but also you need to know where you want to be and when. And then there's this why at the end. And what I mean is, why are you where you are today? Why did you end up here? You know, what has driven the organization to think that this is acceptable? Because if you don't answer that why, you can really struggle to get to where you want to go. And the second part of it is with the where you want to go. Why do you want to get there? What's the business case? What's the justification? What's going to drive the organization to want to go from where you are today to where you want to be in the future? All right, so a lot of people think about the where are you today and where do you want to go. What I'm adding to the big 5 for you guys today is the why. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the slides to follow. The second big 5 for me, a lot of people take off like that shuttle in that picture and everything looks great. They haven't really considered, though, all the risk associated with launching this project. So while they start out of the gate really nice, they really charge forward, they don't realize that, hey, maybe the operations people aren't going to support you. Or maybe your plant manager is going to change. Or maybe the leadership of the organization is going to take a different path or go through different initiatives or add on additional burden from a corporate initiative standpoint. But what I'm suggesting here from a risk identification standpoint is before you launch like the rocket, take the time, just like NASA would, to go through and identify every one of the risks that you can think of and understand that a little better. Now I'll show you some tools for that in a few minutes. Step 3 or big 5, 3 of our big 5 is plan, plan, plan. I know I don't do the best job in this area. You know, if I get a task or I get a project to do, I immediately am ready to go. I'm ready to take off and get this thing going. But what I know at the end of the day, if I want the project to be successful, I need to take the time to plan. Now, we know this from a planning and scheduling standpoint. We know that a planned job typically takes about half as long as an unplanned emergent repair. So it's the same thing with a project. We've got to take the time to plan so that the implementation goes smooth and takes less time. Now, I've broken the plan down into 3 areas. The first, playing off of number 2 here, is plan for your risk. So take the time to identify the risk and then decide how you're going to plan for those things happening as you move through the implementation. Now, the second plan I've got for you today is the communication side of the plan. What are you doing to communicate to the organization the value of this project that we're moving forward? What are you doing to show the organization what it's going to do for them and how it's going to make their job better? What are you doing to get them involved and get them engaged? And to jump back to that early crazy lone nut video, how are you going to get to the tipping point from a communication standpoint? So we'll talk a little bit about a few tools that you can use there as well. Now, the last of the plan that we're going to talk about today is the project plan. And this, for a lot of folks, is a piece that they just absolutely detest. They think it's something you do at the very beginning, and then you put it on a poster somewhere and you hang it up in a room. It's tough. It's painful to go in and keep everything up to date and to make sure the individual tasks have been completed and or tracked to where they are versus the plan. There's a lot of work that goes into project management and project planning. I'm going to show you just a piece of one of these projects in a little bit, but this project plan is where that communication plan and that risk management plan come together to give us the steps along the way to getting to that new level of performance. Now, I'll also show you very briefly today, but I will show you why from a people side this plan, this project plan is so important. And that really leads into number 4 for me today. Number 4 is understanding the soft side. And the soft side of this is, what can you expect from the people? How are you going to get those first followers from the lone nut video? How are you going to make sure that they go out and communicate with the rest of the organization such that everyone begins to understand that doing your project is better than sitting on the hill where they are today? So we'll spend a few minutes in that area. And then the last area that we'll talk about as we go through the rest of the material today is the milestones. And milestones I break down into 2 areas. They're both metrics as well as tasks. So they're measures or key performance indicators of the project, but they're also specific tasks. You know, hey, when I get to this thing, I want to make sure that I celebrate that success moving forward. So we'll talk a little bit about milestones, metrics, and tasks here in just a few minutes. Now, I've got a few more project management problems to kind of play off here of the project management piece. And again, there's a whole body of knowledge that deals with project management that you can spend a lot of time with, and it's an amazing amount of information that you can learn going through it. But here are a few things that I see regularly. You know, how many times have you seen a project started without a plan? All right. There's no real clear direction. Or maybe you start the project or someone else starts the project and they're developing the plan as they go. Seen this over and over. Or maybe it's an insufficient plan. Some people seem to think that project management can be done in PowerPoint. And I'm hoping to show you guys today there's just more to it than you can put in a PowerPoint slide for most real big deal changes to the organization. All right. And then the last big problem that I'm going to try to address today is the insufficient time piece. You can't start a project on Monday and have bottom line results on Friday. All right. I don't care, you know, whether you have an expensive consultant telling you how they're going to do a turbo implementation in your facility and that's going to change the world overnight. It's not possible. At the end of the day, it takes time. Whether that be reliability, operations improvement, or even something like a facet like RCA. You don't see results overnight. So you've got to have that expectation, and it goes back to managing those expectations as we talked about earlier. Now here's kind of an outline, if you will, of what I'm going to go through today. And it's the process that I would go through if you asked me to come in and help you with a project plan. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do my gap analysis, and I'm going to show you a few tools for that. There's nothing new there. People have been doing gap analysis for years. So we'll talk about, you know, some of your options and some of the things that you have available to you. but it's just simply looking at where are you today and where do you want to be at 12, 18, 24 months. Now, the next thing we're going to do, and I mentioned this earlier, is we're going to try to understand our gaps. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't take the time to do. Why are we not planning today? Why are we not using the predictive maintenance tools today? Why are we not developing good maintenance strategies using reliability-centered maintenance? What has led us to believe that it was acceptable to do it this way? All right, that's that understand for me. Then we're going to start planning, and as I talked about, that's planning. There are 3 different plans that we're going to talk about there. And then we get into the real meat of managing the implementation of the project. So when you look at this, I've dedicated 3 out of the 4 to the process of getting ready to implement the project. And I really think we need to think about it that way as we go into these projects. What can we do to dedicate the time up front to make that implementation window as short and as effective as we can? So I've got a video here for you. I'm not going to play the whole video, but I want to give you an example of what some of the best practices look like. So this is a video that we use in our blended learning offerings. I will make a link available so that if you would like it, email me or email Maureen and we'll get it out to you. But I just want to show you a little bit of it so you can see some of these best practices. All right, so I'm going to stop the video there. Like I said, if you want to see more of it, the idea there is, though, there are a lot of really good metrics out there available to help you do your gap analysis. Understand where you're doing well, where you've got areas for improvement, and really what those are worth to you at the end of the day. What we find in implementing reliability, our IBL students that go through the curriculum and implement a project in their area, we expect them, we actually won't even allow them into the curriculum with less than a 10x return on investment. But what we're seeing through that process is a 30x return on investment at the end of the day. So I imagine as you go through and you look at your gaps just like those students do, and you figure out where you are today and where you want to be at the end of the process, at the end of the curriculum for them, that 30x is probably a fairly reasonable number. We've had enough students top that. We've had classes average that as a whole. So I feel pretty comfortable about the changes. But to help you do that, there are some tools out there, and I've put one up on the screen. This is just one part of an assessment tool that you could use. What you see here, this one's based on asset management and ISO 55000, which I'll talk a little more about in a second. But you see some of the elements as you go down the page, and you see the levels, starting with level 1 being pretty immature in that area, moving all the way up to level 5 from a maturity standpoint. So you can go through these tools and read, hey, I'm a level 2 today, but 18 months from now, I want to be a level 4. But before I do that, help me understand why I'm a level 2. And we start to look at the answers and the questions that might bring up as to the risk of moving forward. So that's just one example, but I really want to dwell on that whole why piece. And so I've thrown in a quick look at a fault tree. And this fault tree was really put in here to help you understand that there is a reason why you haven't implemented the predictive maintenance technologies. There is a reason why you don't plan or you don't schedule work. And so understanding that reason really is going to give you some of the human roots or the systemic roots that you see in this chart, which are also going to be risks that the project faces. So this is really a risk identification step prior to implementing the project. Again, the more we can plan and identify those risks now, the smoother the project will go in the long term. So where do you want to go? What are your gaps? Do you need to be best in class, or can you just not afford that level of performance? What's the order you need to do it in? Are you already good in certain areas and you can use that to pull along others? What are the risks? Have you addressed the risk? And has the communication back and forth about those risks been taken care of? Now, this is one look at the journey. This is actually the pathway to R&M competitive excellence put together by Iridicio and the University of Tennessee. And it's really meant to show you a lot of the steps that you could take if you were implementing reliability as your project. Now, your project may be operations improvement or implementing a CMMS or any one of a number of things. But at the end of the day, there is a list of items that need to be done. And as you can see on the road here, on the pathway, you really do have an order in which you're going to do them. There are just certain things that we wouldn't do first. Now, some of you may be implementing ISO 55000. So what I've done is I've put that in here as well as another resource. And the resource for this is the subjects that all apply to the body of knowledge for asset management. Now, you can get a full list of these and a description of each of them if you go to gfmam.org. That is the Global Forum on Maintenance and Asset Management. They're an organization of organizations that spends a lot of time figuring out what all is part of ISO 55000 and even the bigger part of the asset management system as a whole. Now, the document you may want to download looks just like this. It's the Asset Management Landscape. It's the second edition. It is free, so you can grab this and use it to learn a little bit more about asset management and a little bit more about what you might want to be implementing and what you might identify as gaps within your organization. So what are the potential barriers? What are you going to run into? What are the delays? Could there be loss of key personnel? Could you have higher implementation costs than you forecasted? Could you have competition that drives you in a different direction? All of these could be barriers that you identify through your risk analysis process. Now, there are tools that you can use here as well. This is a tool that we use fairly regularly to understand how risky a project is. And the way this one works is it's broken down into 4 areas, and it looks at different facets, everything from how big of a project this is to how big of a mess is the organization in from a change management standpoint. And by taking those 4 areas and putting them together, we're able to see what the risk to your project is. I just did this last week in the Middle East with quite a few young engineers that were getting ready to implement a big project in each of their locations. And, you know, we had some of them where their organizations were very accepting of change and they were eager to make change happen, and they had lower risk. Then we had others who had been changed and changed and changed, and they were just completely saturated from a change standpoint. And the risk was much higher as they went through this tool. So the tool definitely shows us where we're going to have to focus really, really hard on risk management and even more specifically the project management itself. Now, another one that you might use, and I know many of you are probably familiar with this one, this is just a SWOT analysis. I'm going through and I'm looking, hey, what's positive? What's going well? Where are my strengths within the organization? And then on the other side, what are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats? Now, what I will tell you from my personal experience is this is a good place to start, but unfortunately, the boxes aren't quite big enough. So in my mind, if you really want to understand all of the threats, all of the issues, all of the risk, you're probably going to have to go with either a bigger sheet of paper or maybe a different tool. One of those tools, if you're an engineer and you've ever done an FMEA before, you can take that FMEA and turn it into a perfect risk analysis tool. You can talk about what your project's supposed to do. That's the function. You can talk about how your project could not deliver the results that you're expecting. That's the risk. You could then use an RPN, a risk priority number, to calculate how risky is each of the elements that you've identified. In other words, is there a good chance of this happening or not? Is it going to be a big deal or not a big deal? Can I see it coming or is it going to surprise me? So I can do all of that within the FMEA framework that you may be familiar with, especially if you're doing a lot of RCM. Just a quick example I've put up there. You can see the three categories: probability of occurrence, severity of the outcome, and difficulty of detection, and then that generates that risk priority number. If the number is very high, closer to 100 in this example, I'm going to move those things up and make sure that they really get addressed in our project and communication plan. Now, I'm going to give this one to you guys. I want you to interact a little bit. I know I can't see you or talk to you on these webinars, but I want you to take just a second, read through each of the 6 categories here. I want you to give yourself a number 1 through 5, all right? And I want you to think about the last project you implemented, because this is the introduction to why communication is so important. I'll give you about 1.5 minutes to do that. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started back up. So I hope this kind of gives you an idea of where you are today. So what I would do is I would total up these numbers and kind of see how close are you to 30. If you've got 28, 29, 30, you probably have got a pretty good grasp on what communication is and what the risks are associated with it. But this is just one of our tools that we use to help people understand how to get started. Now, once you have that communication plan, the next thing that you're going to need to understand, and we'll get into more detail in a few minutes, but how are you going to get there? You know, who all's going to be involved? Who all's going to be expected to change or understand what you're doing? Because that's going to play into what communications have to go out and what medias you use to do that. So I've put an example up here of an implementation model. This is one that we use pretty regular using our IBL students. The IBL students are leading focus teams that are implementing various pieces of reliability within the organization. They are the internal consultant. They are a student. They are an employee of the organization, but they are also the internal consultant for each of the focused areas that they're looking at. They're all going to implement their findings or their improvements to the processes in a pilot area with the approval of that lead team that you see at the top. So without even getting down into the second, third, and fourth area, we know from a communication standpoint that we need to be communicating back and forth with the lead team. We know that we need to be communicating with all those little colored dots in the pilot area because each one of those dots represents different people. We know that the reliability engineering team and that IBL needs to be communicating with planning and scheduling and work control so that all the links work between all of these pieces moving forward. But this is how we start to see, wow, there's a lot more to this than I thought. And there is a lot of communication that I'm going to have to take care of. What I'll tell you is, if you don't get the communication piece right, I have never heard a positive rumor. And what I mean is, at the end of the day, if you don't fill in the communication void, the individuals in the organization will go negative almost every time. So we need to think about how are we going to address all of those areas and all of the affected individuals. As we move into second and third area, fourth, fifth, and sixth area of implementation, we need to be pre-communicating and getting those ready. I kind of compare it to tilling the soil a little bit, getting out there, breaking up the hard ground, getting it ready to go out and sow the seeds of reliability across the rest of the facility. Now, here's an example of how you might do that. All right, it's a simple example. We've definitely scaled it back to fit on a PowerPoint slide. You would do this in Excel typically. But what you'll notice is it has timing. We've defined that in the stages of DMAIC, but you could use anything from your perspective. It talks about who the audience is. Who are we talking to? Why are we doing this? What are we going to tell them? All right. That what are we going to tell them goes in messages and objectives. And so maybe you identified a risk that said the union in your facility may not be interested in this reliability improvement strategy. So here's where we would put a message forth to the union to help them to understand how this is mutually beneficial to everyone. And I've seen this many times over the years. One in particular that comes to mind is a paper mill in Canada. That paper mill had 5 unions in that facility. But you know what? At the end of the day, because the leadership of that organization did such a good job of communicating, all 5 of those unions, well, I take that back. 4 of the 5 of those unions were pulling for reliability as hard or harder than the leadership team. And it was very interesting to me to watch that happen because they realized what was in it for them. They realized that if they could improve reliability, there would be more work. And if there was more work, there would be more labor. If there was more labor, there would be more union dues. So they got that. And they got it because of the great job that that leadership team did of communicating through this communication plan. Now, the next column you see here is the delivery method. The delivery method is absolutely critical. We live in a society today where everyone thinks it's acceptable just to send an email. And to be honest, I'm almost over emails at this point because everyone thinks if they send one email out to the organization that they've communicated everything that they need to do. And it's got to be more than that. You've got to think about who's your audience. What is the message that I'm trying to get out there? Let that dictate the delivery method. Because sometimes communication needs to be two-way. I need to look someone in the eyes and I need to tell them what we're thinking about doing and I need to hear what they think about that. So that method may be face-to-face two-way dialogue. It may be email, it may be video, it may be newsletters. I mean, there's so many different methods you can use depending on the message and the audience. What is always efficient is not always effective, and that's the problem that I have with a lot of email communication. The next one you see is who's the sender. Sometimes you need the communication to come directly from their first line supervisor. Other times, it really needs to come from the leader of the organization. And it again depends on what the message is and who the audience is. And then you can add in your date and time. I would say you could add a couple more columns around who's going to deliver it, who's the single point of accountability for creating the messaging. All of those kinds of things could be added out onto the Excel spreadsheet to make this communication plan even more robust. The next thing, this is one of our graphics that we use to explain planning and scheduling and work execution management. And what I put this up here for really today was to share with you guys that take the time to create these little learning models. If you know that you're getting ready to implement something, find a way that's relatable to explain it to the audience. This is part of that communication plan. What is the media? How are we going to explain it? You know, a lot of people talk about operators and explaining to an operator that, you know, reliability is important. And they use a simple example of a rental car versus your own car. And that's these learning models that I'm talking about. Figure out what your audience can relate to, what they'll find interesting, and then use those learning models to explain what could be a pretty complex topic. Now, once you've identified the risk and you've started working through that communication plan and that risk plan, and you know now, okay, there's some key elements that I've got to do. Now you got to start to build the actual master plan. Or for us, this would be a Microsoft project document. Now, I've got a little snippet of one here up on the screen, and you can see a little bit of what's there. This one's pretty large. And depending on your initiative or your implementation, yours may be as well. I worked with an automotive client just recently, and they're working through a master plan for implementing reliability. And in that facility, their project plan is well over 1,000 lines because they've broken it down into all the steps that they need along the way. Now, as I said earlier in the opening session of this webinar, this is not something that a lot of us enjoy, and I get that. All right, but at the end of the day, I can assure you, if you're not managing off of a project plan, you will not get it implemented in the time that you want to, or at least not the time that it could be done. All right. So if you ask me, while as much as I don't necessarily enjoy working in Microsoft Project and developing plans, at the end of the day, the fight is worth it. It is worth it to push through and create a good job plan or a good project plan. It is worth it to keep it up to date. It is worth it to understand the predecessors and predecessors that are occurring and look at the Gantt chart and see where you are and see where you're missing pieces and missing the timeline. It's all here and it's all there to be managed, but you got to stay plugged into it all the way through the implementation. I want to tell you why for a few minutes, and I won't take long to do this. This is a single point lesson that many of you have probably seen me talk about if you've seen me present at all. But the reason I put this up today is really to talk about that project plan. So for those of you that have sat through some of the presentations that I've done on this slide, you know that we talk about a whole lot here. We talk about ADCAR, we talk about John Cotter's Leading Change. But today I want to specifically talk about the situational leadership piece. And so what you see, the situational leadership is the curve that you see that's red and green at the top, and then the red, orange, yellow, and green box at the bottom. Now, situational leadership was developed by Ken Blanchard. It's been around for quite some time. But what's interesting about it is as you go through the change process, or as you go through the stages of situational leadership, the project plan addresses every one of those stages. If you look at my performance curve up there at the top, the red and green, you see area 1. This is where people are excited about the implementation and they're looking forward to doing it. Then you see area 2, where they're not really that excited anymore. We call that the valley of despair. Your performance is less than it was before. People are grumbling and griping and telling you how the old way was so much better. All right. Then you see area 3, where we break back across the performance line and now we're returning into positive performance. And then you see area 4, where we reach the new level of performance, or your project has been implemented in the facility. Now, what I want to do, and I'll direct you down to the box, the 4-quadrant box, where it says directing, coaching, supporting, and delegating in those boxes. That's what we need to do in each of those stages. But what I want to just specifically show you today is that in stage 1, that master plan, it tells the organization what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're going to do it. When we get to stage 2, it helps us break it down into little bite-sized pieces so that we can do one little thing and another little thing and another little thing without getting overwhelmed by the whole scope of the project. When you get over into area 3, you've done a whole lot of work at this point. You've put a whole lot of time and effort into your project, but you have absolutely nothing from a return on investment. So it can be easy to get discouraged. In fact, a lot of facilities would just go to the next initiative at this point and move on to something else. But no, you've got to keep pushing forward, and the project plan helps you show the organization all the work that we've done, even though it hasn't quite given us the return on investment yet. If you remember in the early slides, I said you can't get a turbo super implementation that happens overnight and results happen like magic. And if you do have a way, call me. We'll talk about a business opportunity. But my point here is, because of that fact, I need to be able to show the organization all the things that they've done in that master plan and keep pushing them forward until they get them fully implemented and up to that budgeted improvement. All right, so that's that master plan pushed into the change process, and I wanted to show you how it actually delivers those results. Now, the Cotter Model, the 8 steps of change, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this today, but what I will tell you, this is a great checklist for your master plan. If you haven't addressed all of these black boxes, then you've probably missed something. So if you're ready to implement within your facility, take the time. Go through and look at these individual boxes. See if you've addressed it. See if you've addressed it through your risk plan, your communication plan, or through your project plan. One more thing to be aware of, a real struggle for a lot of folks. When you start implementing your project, you will go through what is on the screen, just like everybody else in the organization will. And what I mean is, when you first hear about reliability-centered maintenance or root cause analysis or reliability improvement or WIBL analysis or statistical process control or you name it, whatever the topic is, you're excited in the beginning. You're reading white papers. You're taking time to watch really boring webinars. All right, you are eager to learn something. But then just wait, you'll go to the danger zone. Now, the danger zone is where you think you got it all figured out. The danger zone is where you think 5 whys and fishbones is all you need to do root cause analysis. The danger zone is where you've done one FMEA on one piece of equipment and you think you understand RCM fully. All right, we see it over and over and over. And not only does it happen to us, just like it happens to me or anyone else that's doing an implementation, it's going to happen to those in your organization that are affected by the implementation. So what you need to keep in mind is there is going to be a peak where I think I know a lot more than I actually do. Now, this graph actually comes from the aviation world. And it has a lot of data to back it up, specifically around airplane accidents, crashes, and other property losses. So there's a lot more to it than I've got time to explain today, but I want you to be looking for the people in your organization that are in that danger zone, and you've got to work to figure out how you're going to get them through it. So you've got a plan. Let's keep it up to date. It can change. That's completely okay. If it changes, communication of the change is critical. All right. It's not one person's document. It's not one person's implementation. You've got to get those first followers involved. You've got to get the organization involved. You shouldn't be the only one managing the project if you want the buy-in of the rest of the organization. Make sure you're using those predecessors to keep a good idea for where your work is, where your critical paths are, and what things need to happen in what order. Now, share at the appropriate level based on the needs. And what I mean here is you've got the ability to expect, especially in project, to hide the details underneath various steps. In the beginning, no one needs to see those details. When they get into the value of despair, you need to show them only some of the details. Then as you travel through, you might show all the work that they've done, but not necessarily expand all the work to go. The idea here, though, is don't overwhelm them in the beginning with a 3,000-line project plan. Just show them the key points that they need to understand, and then expand that plan as it's needed as you implement. Now, milestones and metrics are my last area to talk about, and all I want you to remember here is that there is more than just the measures or the metrics of the implementation. Think about how can you celebrate that first time you finish an RCM, or how can you celebrate when you finally get the failure codes in your CMMS system correct, or your hierarchy is finally cleaned up. Those are the milestones that you want to continue to push and continue to celebrate to drive people through the valley of despair and up the other side into profitability. So start early with a plan that grows. Understand where you are, understand where you would like to be, understand why you're not there. Refine your plan, integrate other plans, and use the plan as a tool, not a burden. All right, and that leads directly into the big five that we started this lecture or this session today with. Know where you are and why. Risk identification. Plan, plan, plan. Understand that soft side and make sure you identify those milestone metrics. That's all I've got for you today. I hope you can take away a couple things that will help you with that next project that you're going to implement within your facility. If you want to talk more about what you're doing or what good looks like or what others have done in the past, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with one of our coaches. You can talk to some of our folks, or we can sit down and chat about what you're trying to do specifically. My contact information is on the slide there, and thank you for your time today for this webinar, and thank you, UE Systems, for hosting it.
All right, thank you, Shon. That was great. Lots and lots of information. So just to remind everybody, I did record that. I'm still recording. So we will have this up on our website later on. Shon's got his email address up there. So if you're interested in any particular slide or anything like that, it's best to just shoot Shon an email, and he can take it from there. I do have two quick questions here, Shon, that we'll get asked, and then we'll let everybody head on their way. Kind of towards the beginning, when you were talking about the planning process, you were talking about an order in which you would introduce PDM technologies, and the person was just wondering, is there a reason to introduce one before the other, or does it really not matter? Maybe you could just talk about that for just a second.
Well, certainly. Yeah, I think there's definitely an order. I do believe that it is a little bit situational. And what I mean by that is it depends on what you've had in the past and what you've implemented and what experience you have. For example, if I were going to try to start with vibration, that may be a pretty heavy lift because it takes a while to get really proficient at vibration. There's a lot to learn. You really need to be a level 2 or level 3 vibe guy to be able to understand everything that you're seeing in the data from the facility. So that may not be the best place to start, all right? But if you already have that experience in your organization, that changes things a little bit. Ultrasound, great place to start, great tool. It can be used in a lot of different areas. It's both mechanical and electrical. It's also going to help you with leaks and identifying those leaks and getting those early wins that help to pay for your predictive implementation. Infrared's another great one. It's visual. Now there's some gotchas. There are some things you got to watch out for with infrared so that you understand how the technology works. But it's something that you can get some benefit early and show people the success that you're having that will end up building into you being able to adopt more and more of the predictive technologies moving forward.
Okay, and one last one, and it might be hard to answer quickly, but when you're talking about the insufficient time and people wanting to have results by Friday and that kind of thing, what would be kind of your quick little elevator pitch for handling a management team that has those unrealistic demands for the ROI and the expediency in which they want to see that?
Speaking of expediency, I'll see if I can get through this in a couple of minutes. Yeah, there's a lot of things you can talk about here. I think the first thing is to understand why the leadership team thinks the way that they think. Many times it's because some consultant with an MBA has come in and told them that they could do a turbo implementation. Now it's about communication. All right. Let me communicate what the real expectation is. Let me explain to you what this really looks like. Let me show you the project plan that we're moving forward. All right. When you start showing that project plan to them, it becomes pretty clear, I think, in many cases that you can't do all those steps overnight. And if they're still pushing for an overnight implementation, ask them which steps you want to leave out. Which steps in this master plan do you think add no value? And you'll find that, they can't answer that. And I'm being a little confrontational almost as to make a point. But, what you want to do is really use data. Don't try to use emotion, and show them how that things that are implemented slow are going to be much more sustainable. I mean, none of us can go to the gym and be ready for a marathon by Thursday. It's going to take time to get that training and that preparation taken care of.
Well, that's a bummer. No, I get it. All right.
I'm going to try it this afternoon.
I know, right? Okay. All right. Well, that's really great information. And like I said, we did record it. If folks have additional questions, definitely be in touch with Shon. As you can tell from the presentation, just lots of information and experience that he can have a great conversation with you and help you guys with whatever it is you need. We are right at 2, so I will end this now. Let everybody go off and have a great rest of the day. Thanks again, Shon. And if anybody has any questions at all, you know how to get in touch with us at UE Systems, and now you know how to get in touch with Shon. So we're all here as a resource. Have a great afternoon, and we'll be in touch soon about our August webinar, and we'll hope to see you all back here next month. Thanks.